I'm here to do the devil's work.
All right, guys, we have reached the final video in my series of giving you my top 10 favorite horror movies from every single decade, starting from the 1970s and ending now with the 2010s. The interesting thing about the 2010s is there isn't really a true thread line with the themes of horror movies that were coming out at the time. The slasher genre had kind of died off after Scream revitalized it for a little while. There were a little bit more paranormal, ghost-type movies coming out around this time, but really, there is just a lot of variety here, which is a good thing. I'm looking at my top 10 list, and a lot of them are very, very different from one another, which is great, you know, to give us that kind of variety. I think there are some truly great gems here. It might not hit the peak of the 1970s or the 1980s as far as horror masterpieces go, but there are a lot of good things that came out during this decade. Now, once again, to reiterate two things about this list. Number one is that these are just my personal favorite films of the decade. They are not meant to be the best horror films of the decade. They are not meant to be an objective list of any kind. This is purely 100% personal preference, and that's what the list is made of. Also, if you don't see a movie on the list that you love, it could just be because I've never seen it, which means that I can't add it onto the list because I don't know how I feel about it. It's not because I necessarily disliked it. But with that out of the way, let's start off with some honorable mentions. The first Terrifier film did come out this decade, and although Terrifier 2 and 3 are way better, I still do enjoy the first movie quite a bit. I also like the It remake from 2017. I know a lot of people didn't like that movie, but I thought at least It Part 1 was done really well. I thought the child actors did a great job, and normally I'm a hard person to please when it comes to child actors. Normally, I really don't like child actors, but I thought the entire crew did a really good job here, so I enjoyed that for what it was. Another honorable mention would be a movie called Green Room, which is kind of a grounded, more realistic fight for survival kind of movie. You could call it more of a suspense film, but it's very dark. I would definitely consider it to be a horror film. I really like the Rob Zombie movie, Lords of Salem. I think it's actually his best film besides The Devil's Rejects. I think it's very underrated, underappreciated. It's not the same kind of Rob Zombie style that he's done before. It's a lot more trippy. It's a little bit more of like a Dario Argento style, but I think he pulls it off pretty well. The first Insidious came out in the 2010s, which I also think is really good. I enjoy that one quite a bit. There's a movie called Red State, which is actually directed by Kevin Smith, who's more known for doing comedies in the Jay and Silent Bob films, but Red State is actually pretty terrifying, and there's a really great kind of shootout action sequence that happens for a big bulk of the movie, more than you would expect, which I also think was done very, very well. But yeah, besides that, let's get into my top 10 proper. At my number 10, I'm going to put a movie called American Mary. And no, it's not connected to American Psycho whatsoever, but you do kind of have to be a psycho to enjoy this film. Katharine Isabelle leads this film. She does a phenomenal job. You might also know her from Ginger Snaps or Freddy vs. Jason, but here she's the main character that really steals the show. It's a story about a woman that's in med school learning how to do surgeries and ends up doing these weird sort of like illegal back alley surgeries for people in order to make some money. But then she also goes into a direction where she starts to use her skills as a surgeon to get vengeance on particular people that have wronged her, and just starts going down this very dark path. And it is a body horror movie. Limbs are removed, things are opened up, there's lots of blood everywhere. Phenomenal performance by Katharine Isabelle. It's really good, very underappreciated. I definitely would recommend checking it out if, you know, you're into body horror, I guess. At my number 9, I'm going to put the movie Let Me In, which is actually a remake of the original foreign film called Let the Right One In. This is the American version, and it's directed by Matt Reeves, who recently did The Batman that a lot of people liked, but this is still my favorite movie that he's made. Now, Let the Right One In is also a phenomenal movie, and they're basically the same. This one just changes a few things here and there, but I saw this version first, so I was very, very attached to this version. And it's a story about a boy that's kind of being bullied, being picked on, feeling very isolated, and he creates this connection with this young girl who is actually not really a young girl, but a vampire, that was turned into a vampire when they were young and has been around for a very, very long time, has a caretaker. And as this boy's trying to navigate life, the only person or only thing that actually really seems to care about him is this vampire girl. But of course, there are more dark things happening beneath the surface, but I love the way that this movie is filmed. There's a shot that's a car crash that the camera is in the back of the car during the entire shot of the car like rolling, and like the actor inside of the car responding to what's happening, which I think is really, really well done. The entire setting of this movie is this cold, kind of dreary atmosphere. Like there's so many night shots. There's always snow on the ground. It feels damp. It feels wet. It feels like just sort of that, feeling that everything is dead, like everything is just kind of decaying away. We're in the midst of winter, there's no leaves on the trees, and everything just feels like that dark, dreary, middle of winter feeling, which is also, relating to what the character is going through, where just he has nobody and everyone is a piece of shit to him. But I think it's really well done. I think it's shot phenomenally. I think all the acting performances are great. So yeah, definitely would recommend this one too. In my number 8 spot, I'm going to put the Mike Flanagan film Oculus, another movie that I think is really underrated and took me by surprise. It was one that at the time I watched it, I didn't know who Mike Flanagan was or anything. And I kind of just assumed it was going to be, a whatever kind of throwaway horror movie. And I actually wound up loving it a lot. I don't want to spoil anything about it. It's sort of a movie where there's a mystery that constantly unfolds, but essentially these two siblings, their parents were killed when they were young, and they believe it has something to do with this mysterious mirror in their house. I know, like, the plot sounds silly when you just say it, like it's about a supernatural mirror. It is, but it's awesome. You have like two parallel stories kind of going on at the same time of them as children and them as adults and trying to figure out what is happening with this mirror. And it's kind of one of those films that keeps you in suspense for a while, not really knowing if something supernatural is happening or not. And then it gets to a point where there's no choice but to believe that something supernatural is going on. And both kind of storylines of them as kids and them as adults are both done very, very well. And technically, yeah, this was my introduction to Mike Flanagan, who now has become this kind of horror legend. I still need to see I still need to watch the TV shows on Netflix. I know I haven't gotten around to it. I know I suck. It's been a very busy month. I will watch it. I promise. At my number 7 spot, I'm going to put The Conjuring 2. I actually like the second Conjuring a lot more than the first one. I like both of them. The third one, well, you can tell James Wan wasn't there, but he is coming back to direct the fourth one, so hopefully that will be good. But I'm not the biggest fan of like the paranormal genre to begin with, but there's a few outliers, of course, out there, and Conjuring 2 is absolutely one of those films. I love everything that's going on here, but it all starts with the characters. I love Ed and Lorraine as a couple. I could watch their dynamic all day long. I love just seeing them, not even necessarily doing the paranormal stuff. I love the scene where he just whips out a guitar and starts singing to her and shit. Like I love their dynamic. I love them as a couple, their relationship. And just the lore of the Conjuring universe, I think, is really interesting. Not all of the movies in it are great, but this movie really establishes a lot of stuff that would become important later on. It's got, I believe, the first introduction of the nun in the universe, and then it does other really cool, creepy things, like with the Crooked Man and all of these various types of supernatural paranormal entities that are all happening within this house. I think the family that they help out is more interesting than the ones in the first movie. And all around, if I'm going to watch a Conjuring movie or any movie in the Conjuring universe, Conjuring 2 is my number 1 go-to. My number 6 is going to be a movie that blew me away the first time that I saw it, and it is Cabin in the Woods. Now, if you haven't seen Cabin in the Woods, I really don't want to tell you the plot because it's more fun to discover it on its own. I don't want to spoil the ending for you or anything, but essentially it takes a very generic scenario. A bunch of kids go to a cabin to hang out in the woods, a la Evil Dead, so I'm already going to enjoy it regardless. But it kind of flips the horror genre on its head. It's a little bit of a meta commentary on horror. Joss Whedon was one of the writers, and, I've always at least loved his writing style since Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all that. And it has that similar vibe, that similar tone, where the kids at the cabin discover that the creepy supernatural stuff that's happening is actually part of something larger. And that's all I'm really going to say. But the movie does not go in the direction that you think it's going to go. It takes you through a familiar setup. It takes you through the cliches, and then maybe similar to Scream in a way, it plays on those cliches and it plays on those tropes, and it creates a further explanation for all of them, which I think is really fun and really creative. And the last like 10 minutes of this movie goes so batshit crazy. Like, it just put a huge smile on my face. When I first saw this, I went to the theater and I didn't know what to expect. Watching those final 10 minutes, I was just in like horror movie heaven. I was just like, this is just amazing and ridiculous and batshit, and I love it. My number 5 is going to be It Follows. Now, this is not It as in Pennywise, but this is a different kind of It. This is a very simple yet amazingly well-crafted film. Essentially, it's about an evil STD. Which all STDs are evil, really. But this one has a specific entity that comes after you to try to kill you. So there is kind of like a curse that is happening here. And when you're infected with it, there's an it that can take the form of anybody, and only you can see it. So only you know that the it is after you, and it's going to come after you and kill you. And it will never stop. So basically, if you are infected with the it, you know, you look out in a crowd of people, any one of those people could be the it that is coming after you to kill you. The most simplistic idea you could think of, but that's what makes it creepy, is that you'll just see somebody in the distance and they're just walking. And you're like, is that the it? Like, I don't know. Like, you don't know which person is the it. It could be anybody, but it's going to walk towards you forever unless you postpone your inevitable death. But this also has a great group of characters. It stars Micah Monroe, who was in Longlegs this year as the main character. And, you know, they all kind of have to figure out what's happening just going on faith of what the main character tells them, because they can't see the it. But unlike a lot of other horror movies where people are like, oh, that's stupid, that's ridiculous, yada, yada, we don't believe you, her friends actually are on board, and they actually try to help her. So that's a unique little spin on the horror cliches as well, is that people actually believe what she's saying, and so they have to try to figure out how to stop the it entity. At my number 4 spot, I am going to go with Evil Dead from 2013. Now, you guys know me. The original Evil Dead is my favorite horror movie of all time. I love the Ash character. I love all 3 original Evil Deads. I love the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV show. Give me as much Evil Dead as you can. And if you're new here, I've told the story before, but when this movie came out, I thought it was a slight against me personally. I was like, why the fuck are they remaking Evil Dead without Ash? I was like, what? You can't make an Evil Dead movie without Ash, all right? That doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna hate this movie. And I had already just recovered from watching the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, which was total fucking shit. So I was like, I can't do this again. Another one of my favorite movies being remade and turned into dog shit. I can't do it. I went to go see it just out of curiosity. I had to check it out. And this movie blew me away. It really did. Now, I don't like this movie as much as the original Evil Dead film. And if you ask me personally, I think Evil Dead is better with Ash in it. Like, he is the standout character of the franchise. But just as a horror movie in its own right, just take all of what you know about Evil Dead away and just watch this as its own standalone horror movie. This movie is badass, and Fede Alvarez has the sauce, man. This movie does not fuck around, and actually not having Ash in it makes it a little bit more tolerable, really, because they're not trying to imitate Ash. They're not trying to do a Bruce Campbell impersonation. You have 5 different characters that are not the characters from the original Evil Dead, which gives you free reign to do whatever you want with these new characters. And that's honestly kind of the best way to do a remake sometimes, where you're not trying to recapture any of the other characters from the original. You're just making your own. And Mia becomes a great character. I love the subversion of her getting possessed first, but then ending up as the final girl. Spoiler, maybe. The violence, the bloodshed, the gore, the bodily dismemberment, it's all here and it's all glorious. And the final act with the fucking burning cabin and the raining blood and ripping off your own arm a la Guts from Berserk, and then just like shoving the chainsaw to the demon's face. It's just the fucking coolest thing ever. It is a movie that I absolutely had to eat my words on after I watched it. The Evil Dead remake is awesome. At my number 3 spot, this is a very special one. I'm putting the movie Train to Busan. This is a Korean zombie horror film. And when I tell you, I thought the zombie genre was done. You know, it's like after the 2000s and the 2010s, how oversaturated with zombie content can you be? Like, Romero made the best zombie movies ever, and then there were other good ones here and there, you know, and then The Walking Dead came out, and that kind of took over the world, and then there were so many other zombie movies, and I got sick of it, man. I was like, I can't sit through another zombie movie. They're all the same at this point. Like, I'm just done. I'm over the zombie genre. Train to Busan almost became my favorite zombie movie of all time. This movie is incredible. This is like legitimately, I think, an essential zombie movie to see. Now, it is the fast running zombies, so if that's not your thing, you know, there's that to consider, but I would highly recommend watching it anyways, because this movie has everything that you could possibly want. It has the horror, it has the gore, it has action, it has great, intense, suspenseful sequences, and this movie has a lot of emotion and a lot of heart. At the end of the day, this movie is about a father and his daughter, and that is the core emotional crux of this movie, and that stays consistent the entire film, and it makes it all the better for it. This movie puts characters first over the action, over the horror. However, when the action and horror are there, it's just done in this immaculate way. Obviously, it mostly takes place on a train, Train to Busan, but there are other locations as well. The train setting actually enhances the kind of terror because you're stuck in this sort of like long corridor and you kind of have to fight your way through on occasion. There's one character that like straps his wrists up with like, it might just be tape. I can't remember what it was, but he does that to try to like avoid getting bitten. This movie, just similar to Evil Dead that I just mentioned, was a shock. It blew me away. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, but now I would put Train to Busan in the ranking, obviously the first 3 George Romero movies, Shaun of the Dead, and Train to Busan, it's all up there in my favorite zombie films. My number 2 favorite horror movie of the 2010s is Dr. Sleep. So yes, the second Mike Flanagan directed movie to make it onto this list, but it definitely deserves to be here. I love this movie. I sing this movie's praises all the time. I think it's completely underrated. It bombed at the box office. Not enough people have seen it. I love Dr. Sleep. So if you don't know, technically Dr. Sleep would be a sequel to The Shining, but not in the way that you think. So Dr. Sleep is obviously based on the novel written by Stephen King, which is a sequel to his novel, The Shining. However, The Shining movie and The Shining novel are very, very different. So Dr. Sleep, the movie, is somehow this brilliant blend of an adaptation of the book, but it does tie itself into The Shining movie, at least in terms of like how the location looks. We go back to the Hyperion Hotel in the climax of Dr. Sleep, and it looks just like it did in The Shining in the movie. And it's fantastic. But this movie is about the boy from The Shining, Danny Torrance. So Jack Torrance's little kid, the kid on the bike from the first movie. It's about him as an adult, dealing with years of having access to, The Shining and what that means. But it goes in a completely different direction. It's not trying to recapture The Shining. It's a whole entirely different story. So I understand thinking about it in terms of, a sequel to The Shining. Don't think about it that way. Just think about it as it's its own story in the same universe. It's completely different, and 90% of the film does not take place at the hotel. It's about Danny Torrance as an adult. but they introduce all of these great concepts with him of how he's dealing with this and how he's kind of driven himself to alcoholism, similar to his father, to kind of drown it all out. And it creates this badass like power system with the shining ability. There's this group of traveling gypsies that essentially keep themselves young by absorbing this ability from other people, and they particularly do it with children. Now, there's a scene where a child, a young boy, gets basically like viciously murdered by this group of gypsies, and it is horrific. It's not gory, it's not bloody or anything like that, but it's just the kid is screaming, and you know, these like entities are enjoying it and like absorbing his energy and shit, and it's fucked up. I also think Ewan McGregor does a amazing job as the main character. He's one of my favorite like underrated actors. I always love when he shows up. You know, he's Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's in Big Fish. You know, there's a movie called Men That Stare at Goats I like a lot with him. Ewan McGregor is so underrated, man. And he does a phenomenal job in this movie. I love it so much. Highly recommend. But my number one horror film of the 2010s for me personally, I have to give it to Hereditary, because Hereditary is the first movie in a long time that I can actually admit scared the shit out of me. And it's mostly kind of that last 15 minutes when everything is going haywire. Again, it's kind of a movie that is hard to describe without spoiling the entire plot, but what I think is so brilliant about Hereditary is that the first half of the movie is more of a family drama than it is horror. Like, there's a death in this family. Toni Collette plays the mother, and she just does such a... I cannot believe she was not nominated for an Academy Award. She does such a great job. But, you know, she has to react and respond to the loss of her child and what she's going through. And, you know, the first half of the movie is so bleak. It's dark. It's depressing. It has this overall depressing tone. I'd say maybe similar to like The Exorcist or something, in the sense that there's no levity whatsoever. Like, the entire movie is just dark. And about halfway through, they introduce this supernatural element of being able to communicate with the dead, you know, and obviously the grieving mother wants to do that. And so then that's when more kind of creepy horror stuff happens. But there is kind of a twist, and it is the kind of movie that I think would be better to go back and rewatch, because you're going to see all of the clues along the way of what leads to the ending scene. And it's like shots that aren't, like, the things that creep me out are just thinking about it afterwards. So there's like a shot in the hallway in the dark with like, I won't explain why, but there's a bunch of naked people. And you think that's not scary, right? Like Leatherface is scary, you know, like Freddy Krueger is scary, like naked people. But dude, it's the way that it's shot. It's the kind of shot that makes you not want to look down your own hallway in the middle of the night. Like, when you leave your bedroom to go take a piss and you look down the hallway and it's all dark, like, imagine if you just saw that. Imagine if you just saw like 5 naked people just like, what the fuck? Like, I remember when I was young getting into horror movies. I think like the first time I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre when I was like 12 scared the fucking shit out of me, right? And Hereditary, it didn't scare me as bad as that did when I was 12, but I think this movie has come the closest. You know, it's like when you watch a lot of horror movies, you become very desensitized to things, you know? And I think Hereditary deserves the number 1 spot for me, because it actually is a movie that affected me. Actually, I think the movie before that did, I think, was Martyrs, probably. But I still think, even though Martyrs is more graphic, I think Hereditary just personally just like freaked me out more. So I don't know. Anyways, guys, there you have it. Those are my top 10 favorite horror movies of the 2010s. Let me know what you think of my list down below, and go ahead and leave your list if you would like. This was a fun video series to get through. I wish I was able to do more decades. I just didn't have time throughout the month, because I'm trying to get the Living Dead retrospective video done, which is like taking... I'm getting down to the wire, man. I want to release it on Halloween, and I'm trying so hard. I've had these other like chapters and episode reviews that I've needed to do, and I'm trying to get through everything this month. So I really did want to give you guys more, but hopefully this is enough to tie you over for now. So thanks for watching, guys. I do appreciate it. Please give the video a like and a comment. And if you want to support the channel on a deeper level, which I would also greatly appreciate, even $1 a month goes a long way, man. Helps me out a lot. if you sign up to the Patreon or channel memberships down below, as well as all the social media links where you can follow me. You'll find it all there. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you later.